What if the love story that captivated the world was nothing but a carefully crafted performance? Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that the person you sacrificed everything for, the person you believed loved you with equal intensity, never really loved you at all. That's not just heartbreak. That's devastation on a level most of us can't even begin to comprehend. This is where Prince Harry finds himself. A man who walked away from his family, from his heritage, from centuries of tradition, believing he was doing it all in the name of love, only to find out love might never have existed in the first place. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Think about it. Harry wasn't just anyone. He was a prince, the spare to the heir, the rebellious royal who always seemed desperate to carve out his own path. And when Meghan Markle came into his life, he thought he had found the answer to every unspoken prayer. A woman who would finally understand him, stand with him against the cold walls of the monarchy, and love him not for the crown on his head, but for the man he was. At least, that's what he believed. That's what we all believed. But then came the diary, a secret journal written by Meghan herself. Pages filled with words that ripped the illusion to pieces. Lines that were colder than any royal scandal could have prepared him for. Because inside those pages was the admission that Meghan never truly loved Harry. She wrote openly, almost clinically, that he was her stepping stone to global status. Her golden ticket. Her way into the crown. Not the man, but the title. The words didn't whisper doubt. They screamed betrayal. And when Harry's eyes scanned those words, the man who once gave up palaces, titles, and blood ties in the name of his wife, realized he had been nothing more than a pawn. But let's rewind for a moment. Before the fury, before the tears, before Harry's voice echoed through the Montecito mansion telling Meghan to leave, there was the fairy tale. Do you remember how it all began? The glitzy headlines, the romantic wedding, the speeches about modern love breaking royal barriers? The world was intoxicated by the idea of an American actress falling in love with a British prince. It sounded like something out of a Disney film, except it wasn't. It was real, or at least it looked real. Meghan dazzled crowds with her poise, her charm, her Hollywood sparkle. Harry seemed reborn, smiling wider than ever before, claiming he had found his soulmate. The press called it the love story of a generation. Millions tuned in to their wedding, convinced this was history rewriting itself, a new royal era driven by love instead of duty. But now, with the diary in hand, Harry is forced to wonder, was it all a performance? Was every touch, every gaze, every carefully staged photograph nothing more than a perfectly executed role? And here's the more painful question. How could he not have seen it? Did William see it? Did Charles? Did the Queen herself know? And did Harry simply refuse to hear what others were trying to tell him because he was so desperate to believe? The diary changed everything. And it's not just because of the words themselves, but because of what they revealed about Meghan's intentions. She admitted to needing Harry, not wanting him. She admitted to craving the crown, not the connection. She admitted to seeing him as leverage, not love. How many of us have feared that kind of betrayal in our own lives? That the person we thought we knew is not who they really are. Now imagine that betrayal playing out under the spotlight of the world, with billions watching, with newspapers sharpening their knives, and with your children caught in the middle. Harry didn't just feel anger. He felt humiliation. The man who thought he had escaped the trap of royal life now realized he had fallen into an even bigger one. And this one wasn't imposed by the crown. It was crafted by the very woman he thought was his rescuer. Imagine the weight of that realization. You've given up everything for someone, and in their private words, you discover you were never the love of their life. You were the means to their end. And here's where the tension explodes. Harry's rage wasn't quiet. It wasn't controlled. It was volcanic. He stormed through the Montecito estate, diary in hand, confronting Meghan with every line, shouting, demanding answers, asking if their wedding vows were lies, if the children were simply part of her narrative of power. Meghan, always calm under fire, reportedly dismissed his fury at first, but Harry wasn't buying it. His voice carried through the halls of their California home as he told her the unthinkable, pack your bags. Leave. You are no longer welcome here. But what about Archie? What about Lilibet? Meghan insisted she wouldn't leave without them. Harry's answer was shocking. He would raise them himself. He wasn't about to let the woman who used him continue manipulating their children. In that moment, the fairy tale ended, and a new war began. A war of custody, of image, of truth versus lies. And all of it sparked by a single diary. Now, ask yourself, why does this matter right now? Because for years, the public has watched Meghan and Harry control their narrative. They were the ones giving interviews, signing Netflix deals, releasing books. They curated every detail of their lives for maximum sympathy and attention. But the diary is different. The diary is Meghan, unfiltered. Not the actress, not the duchess, not the carefully crafted humanitarian, just the woman behind the mask. And the woman behind the mask wrote words that could destroy everything. Think of the irony. The same woman who accused the royal family of secrecy, of lies, of hidden agendas, was herself keeping the darkest secret of all. And the man she claimed to defend, to cherish, to love, she admitted she never loved him at all. That's not just betrayal. It's hypocrisy of the highest order. The world thought Harry had found freedom. Instead, he found a cage. And as those diary pages hit his eyes, he realized he wasn't the master of his story. Meghan was. She had been scripting it from the beginning, from the first date to the grand wedding, from the Oprah interview to the Netflix cameras. And Harry was just a character in her show. A show that made her rich, famous, and globally relevant. Until now. Because now, the mask has fallen. The diary has shattered the illusion. And Harry, for the first time in years, isn't just a character. He's a man in pain, a man betrayed, a man ready to reclaim his life. But reclaiming it meant doing something no one saw coming. Reclaiming it meant choosing the unthinkable. Reclaiming it meant telling Meghan to leave. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What if the fairy tale wasn't just broken? It was never real to begin with. What if every kiss, every smile, every whispered word that the cameras caught was nothing more than a carefully rehearsed act? That's the question that haunts Harry as we step back into the beginning of this story. Because before the diary, before the shouting in Montecito, before the eviction, there was the illusion. The perfect illusion that captivated the world and convinced even Harry himself that he had finally found true love. When Meghan Markle first walked into Harry's life, she was dazzling. She wasn't like the women of the royal set. She wasn't a posh aristocrat bred for country clubs and polo grounds. She was something entirely different, glamorous, independent, American, an actress who had already tasted fame. For Harry, who had always lived in the shadow of the monarchy, that was intoxicating. Imagine spending your entire life being told what you could and couldn't do, what you could and couldn't say. Then suddenly, here comes someone who is free, bold, unafraid to speak her mind, and most importantly, someone who seems to see you as a man, not a prince. The press ate it up. The headlines practically wrote themselves: a Hollywood starlet and a royal rebel. A love story straight out of the movies. People cheered. Finally, the monarchy looked modern, inclusive, and relatable. Meghan became a symbol of change, divorced, biracial, a woman of the world stepping into a centuries-old institution. For many, it looked like progress. For Harry, it felt like salvation. He wasn't just marrying a woman. He was escaping the cage he had lived in since birth. But here's the contradiction that gnaws at us now. Was Meghan ever escaping with him? Or was she simply walking into the role of a lifetime? She had charm, yes. She had warmth. But she also had ambition. And ambition doesn't switch off just because a wedding ring slides onto your finger. Did Harry mistake ambition for love? Did the world? Think about the signs. Meghan's swift transition from actress to duchess wasn't clumsy. It was calculated. She slipped seamlessly into the royal machine, learned how to pose, how to wave, how to hold Harry's hand at the perfect angle for the cameras. Every appearance looked like a scene lifted from a script. And maybe it was. After all, Meghan wasn't just marrying a man. She was merging her brand with one of the most recognizable names on earth. But here's the painful irony. The more Meghan sparkled, the more Harry seemed convinced it was real. He was glowing beside her, the grin wider than we had ever seen. He defended her at every turn, even when whispers inside the palace said she was difficult, demanding, and obsessed with control. He didn't care. To him, this was love. To him, she was the one who finally understood him. Yet behind closed doors, not everything was as perfect as it looked. William and Catherine raised concerns early. They noticed the speed at which things were moving. They noticed Meghan's knack for the spotlight, her ability to bend the narrative. They warned Harry to slow down, to take his time. But Harry, blinded by what he thought was destiny, pushed back hard. He felt judged. He felt his brother didn't respect his choice. He saw it as history repeating itself, just like the way the family once treated his mother. That's the tragedy of this chapter. Harry wasn't just falling in love with Meghan. He was fighting the ghosts of his past. To him, defending Meghan was defending Diana. To him, protecting her was rewriting history. Every time someone questioned Meghan's intentions, Harry heard echoes of his mother's suffering. So he shut everyone out and doubled down on her. The stronger the criticism, the harder he clung to the illusion. And Meghan? She played her part to perfection. The compassionate duchess. The victim of press cruelty. The outsider silenced by the establishment. She wore the role well, and the public was split. Some saw her as a hero, others as a disruptor. But in Harry's eyes, she was everything. She was the woman he would burn the whole palace down for. And eventually, he did. But here's the chilling thought. While Harry was throwing himself into this love story with abandon, Meghan was already documenting her true feelings elsewhere. In her diary, words that told an entirely different story. Words that revealed she never saw him as the great love of her life, but as the great opportunity of her life. Words that showed the fairy tale wasn't love, it was leverage. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself, how many times have we been fooled by appearances? How many times have we believed the smiles, the gestures, the carefully curated posts on social media? If we can be tricked by strangers, imagine being tricked by the person lying next to you at night. That's the gut punch Harry would later feel when the diary came to light. But even in those early days, the cracks were there. He just chose not to see them. There were moments, subtle ones, where Meghan's mask slipped. Stories of her temper with palace staff, her obsession with how the press covered her outfits, her relentless push for more control over their image. These weren't the signs of a woman lost in love. They were the signs of a woman shaping a brand. But Harry was in too deep to notice. He brushed it off. He told himself all couples fight. He told himself the press exaggerated. He told himself love was worth the chaos. And so the illusion carried on. The wedding came, a global spectacle. Meghan in white, Harry beaming, billions watching. Elton John singing, Oprah waving, a guest list straight out of Hollywood's A-list. To the world, it was a dream. But the irony is almost cruel now. Because while Harry promised forever in front of the world, Meghan had already confessed in her private pages that forever wasn't about love. It was about status. Every fairy tale has a beginning. This one had one too. But instead of once upon a time, it began with a script. And instead of happily ever after, it would unravel in betrayal. Because behind the illusion, behind the smiles and hand-holding and choreographed perfection, Meghan was writing down the truth. A truth Harry wouldn't discover until years later. A truth that would ignite the night he found her diary, tore through its pages, and saw the words that shattered his soul. But how did that discovery happen? And what exactly did Harry read that night? That's where the illusion ends and the nightmare begins. What if the people closest to you had seen the cracks before you did? What if whispers of doubt had been circling long before you ever stumbled upon the undeniable truth? That's where this story tightens. Because while Harry was busy living inside the illusion, others around him, family, friends, even staff, were noticing something wasn't right. Seeds of suspicion had already been planted, but Harry refused to water them. He chose love. Or rather, he chose what he thought was love. It started small. Moments that, to outsiders, seemed trivial, but to those in the palace corridors carried weight. Meghan's insistence on having things her way, no matter the centuries of tradition. The way she brushed off advice, ignored established protocol, and always seemed more concerned about optics than substance. Staff began to murmur. Catherine, calm and observant, noticed how Meghan's every move seemed rehearsed, calculated. William saw it too. But how do you tell your younger brother, the one who idolized his late mother, the one who feels the whole world misunderstood him, that the woman he sees as his savior might actually be his undoing? And yet William tried. There was that now famous conversation, the one Harry never forgave him for. William urging caution. Slow down, get to know her, he said. A simple plea. But to Harry, it was a direct insult to Meghan's character, and by extension, his own judgment. He heard not concern, but condescension. And Meghan? She knew exactly how to stoke the fire. She reminded Harry of Diana, of how she too had been silenced, judged, and dismissed. With every argument, she dug deeper into his heart by aligning herself with his deepest wound. Was that love, or was it strategy? Think about that for a second. When someone knows your pain and uses it, is that comfort or control? The contradiction is sharp. Harry believed Meghan was protecting him from the same fate that destroyed his mother. But in reality, she might have been using that vulnerability as leverage to tighten her grip. The seeds of suspicion didn't stop with William. Palace staff began to quit. Stories trickled out of crying assistants, impossible demands, shouting matches behind closed doors. Meghan's defenders insisted these were lies, spun by a racist press. And to be fair, the British tabloids were ruthless. But can every staffer who walked out be lying? Can every account of bullying, every whisper of manipulation, really be dismissed as invention? Harry thought so. He clung to Meghan's narrative, rejecting everyone else's. But the more Harry defended her, the more isolated he became. His bond with William frayed. His relationship with Catherine grew cold. Even his connection with his father weakened. To Harry, it was him and Meghan against the world. And Meghan? That was exactly how she wanted it. A classic strategy: isolate, then control. Do you remember how quickly things moved after the wedding? The sudden decision to step back from royal duties, the whirlwind interviews, the Netflix deals, the tell-all with Oprah. Every move was about control of the narrative. Meghan always at the center, Harry at her side, echoing her words, supporting her grievances. He wasn't leading the charge, he was following it. And yet he didn't see it. Not then. But hindsight is cruel. Looking back, Harry must ask himself now, how much of his life was truly his choice, and how much was orchestrated by Meghan's hand? Seeds of suspicion were everywhere. The diary just confirmed what others had seen long before he was ready to admit it. Here's where the story twists darker. While Harry defended Meghan with all his might, she was writing the truth in her private diary. That truth? That she never really loved him. That she needed him, not as a partner, but as a stepping stone. She wrote of her craving for status, her hunger for power, her desire to become more than an actress in a cable drama, to become global, to become untouchable. And she achieved it. All because Harry was too blinded by the illusion to listen to the suspicions around him. But let's not underestimate the emotional toll here. Harry wasn't just naive. He was desperate. Desperate to be loved, to be understood, to break free of the monarchy's suffocating grip. Meghan offered all of that, or at least appeared to. And when you're starving for affection, you'll ignore the bitter taste of poison if it's wrapped in sugar. Yet poison leaves traces. The more Meghan pushed for independence, the more people around them noticed Harry shrinking. He wasn't the fiery, cheeky prince anymore. He was quieter, subdued, often parroting Meghan's lines instead of speaking from his own heart. Friends said he seemed tense, guarded, almost rehearsed in his words. Do you see the irony? The man who once rebelled against control had walked straight into a different kind of cage. And then there were the children. Archie's birth was wrapped in secrecy, breaking from royal tradition. Meghan insisted on controlling every detail: where he was born, how he was presented, when and if the public could see him. Lilibet's birth was even more dramatic, with questions swirling around announcements and timing. Harry went along with it all, convinced he was protecting his family. But was he protecting or obeying? The seeds were there. The doubts were there. The warnings were there. But Harry refused to listen. He pushed everyone away, all in the name of a love he now knows never truly existed. And here lies the greatest tragedy. The people who tried to save him from this fate are the same people he alienated. The family he once turned his back on might have been the only ones who saw the truth from the very beginning. And that brings us to the pivotal moment. The diary didn't just expose Meghan. It exposed Harry's blindness. It forced him to confront the suspicions he once rejected. It dragged him face to face with the one question he never wanted to ask. Had he been living a lie from the very start? Because the seeds of suspicion had always been there, hidden in plain sight. All it took was the diary to water them. And when they finally grew, the life Harry thought he had built collapsed around him like a house of cards. But if suspicion was the first crack, discovery was the earthquake. And when Harry finally stumbled upon Meghan's secret diary, the illusion shattered forever. What would you do if you stumbled across a secret that tore your entire life apart? Imagine walking into a room one evening, your mind already heavy with doubts, and finding the one object that confirmed every suspicion you never wanted to believe. That's the moment Harry faced in Montecito. The moment he discovered Meghan's private diary. And with it, the truth he had been running from. It wasn't planned. It wasn't as if Harry had been snooping, searching, desperate to catch her out. No, the discovery came almost by accident. A misplaced book. A drawer left slightly ajar. A leather-bound journal sitting there, not hidden but not exactly meant to be seen. The kind of thing that whispers temptation. Would you open it? Would you dare turn the pages, knowing what you might find could destroy everything you thought you knew? Harry did. And what he found made him wish he never had. The first words weren't shocking. Not at first. Notes about the children, her daily routines, her thoughts on the California sun compared to England's gray skies. Mundane details. But then, as Harry read on, the tone shifted. The words became colder, sharper, more deliberate. She wasn't writing about love. She wasn't writing about happiness. She was writing about strategy. About him, not as a husband, not as a partner, but as a means to an end. Imagine Harry's hands trembling as he turned those pages. His heart pounding, his chest tight, each word digging deeper into the wound he didn't even realize was still bleeding. And then, there it was. The line that would haunt him forever. I needed him to get the crown. Not the man, just the title. Stop and let that sink in. That's not just an admission. It's a confession of intent. She didn't fall in love with the man. She fell in love with what the man represented. Power. Status. Global recognition. Harry wasn't her soulmate. He was her stepping stone. Now, ask yourself, what would you do if you read those words, written in your spouse's own hand? Would you close the diary and pretend you never saw it? Would you confront them immediately? Or would you sit there, in silence, letting the betrayal wash over you like a tidal wave until you couldn't breathe? Harry did all three. He read. He froze. He raged inside. And then he kept reading. Because once you open Pandora's box, you can't close it. You have to know everything. You have to see just how deep the betrayal runs. And the deeper he read, the worse it became. Meghan had chronicled her journey, not as a love story, but as a calculated rise. She wrote about her awareness of the press, about her manipulation of interviews, about how she would leverage every ounce of royal association to secure her brand. Harry saw his life, their marriage, reduced to nothing more than a business strategy scribbled in ink. He read entries about how she studied the royals before meeting him, how she understood the game, how she would always be the one in control. She described herself as an icon in the making. She even referred to Harry, chillingly, as her pathway to power. Imagine reading that. Imagine being the man who gave up his family for her, realizing he had been reduced to a stepping stone. The room must have felt colder. The walls closing in, his pulse racing as the words blurred in front of his eyes. Betrayal isn't just about lies, it's about the destruction of identity. And in that moment, Harry realized he wasn't Harry the man, Harry the husband, Harry the father. To Meghan, he had only ever been Harry the prince. And then the questions began to spiral. Did she ever mean her wedding vows? Did she mean it when she looked into his eyes and told him he was her world? Did she mean it when she held Archie for the first time, when she smiled through the cameras, when she whispered promises in the dark? Or were those two just part of the act? Harry's fury rose with every page. He could feel his throat tighten, his jaw clench, his fists ball up around the fragile paper. But beyond the anger, there was grief. Grief for the man he used to be. Grief for the love he thought he had. Grief for the children who would grow up in the wreckage of a lie. And here's the most devastating irony. The diary wasn't just words, it was proof. Cold, hard proof that Meghan herself could never deny. In her own handwriting, she had destroyed the very illusion she had spent years performing. But let's step back for a second. Why keep a diary at all? Why risk putting such incriminating words to paper? Was it arrogance? Was it the need to confess, even if only to herself? Or was it simply the habit of a woman who had spent her life scripting her own story? Meghan, after all, always had an eye for narrative. Perhaps she thought she could control even this. That no one would ever see. That the diary would remain her private truth, hidden from the man she claimed to love. But Harry did see, and now there was no going back. He slammed the book shut, his chest heaving, his heart breaking. He felt like the walls of Montecito were suffocating him, like the life he had built was collapsing in real time. And Meghan, where was she? In another room? On a call? Smiling that same polished smile she had always given him, the smile that now felt like a mask he could never unsee. The fury inside him was volcanic. It wasn't just the betrayal of a husband by a wife. It was the betrayal of a man who had staked his entire existence on a lie. He had cut ties with his brother, his father, his entire royal heritage for her. And all along, she had been writing the truth in private, that he was never the man, only the title. At that moment, Harry knew there was no more illusion left to protect, no more excuses to make, no more stories to spin. The diary had spoken, and its words had burned the fairy tale to ashes. But Harry wasn't done. He couldn't just close the book and move on. He needed answers. He needed to confront Meghan. He needed to hear from her own lips whether the words on those pages were real. And so, with shaking hands and fire in his eyes, he picked up the diary and went to find her. Because what came next wasn't silence, it was eruption. And no one in that house, not even Meghan herself, was prepared for the storm Harry was about to unleash. What happens when the mask finally slips, and the truth you never wanted to hear is spoken out loud? That's the moment Harry faced when he confronted Meghan with her own words. A confrontation that wasn't just about a marriage. It was about betrayal on the deepest level. The kind of betrayal that rips apart not only your present, but every memory of your past. Because once Harry confronted Meghan with the diary, there was no going back. Picture the scene. Harry storms into the room, the diary clenched tight in his hand, his knuckles white, his face flushed with rage and anguish. Meghan looks up, startled, but only for a moment. Because Meghan has always been quick, always calculating, always able to adapt her expression to whatever situation she faced. But this time, Harry wasn't a journalist, he wasn't a palisade, he wasn't a royal critic. He was her husband, furious, broken, demanding answers she couldn't spin her way out of. He threw the diary onto the table, the leather cover sliding across the polished wood. "What is this, Meghan?" His voice trembled, not with weakness, but with a fury so intense it barely contained itself. "Tell me these aren't your words. Tell me you didn't write this." Meghan's eyes flickered, just for a second, betraying the truth she didn't want him to see. But then, calm as ever, she straightened her posture and tried to play it down. "Harry, you shouldn't have read that. It was private. Thoughts, emotions, nothing more. You're taking it out of context." Out of context. That phrase cut Harry deeper than the diary itself. Context? What context could possibly explain words like, "I needed him to get the crown"? Not the man, just the title. What context could soften, "He is my pathway to power"? What context could turn cold admissions into loving confessions? None. Harry's voice cracked as he read her own words back to her, line by line, each one slamming into the room like a hammer. "You said you never loved me. You said it was always about status. You said I was just leverage." Leverage, Meghan. Is that what I am to you? A ticket? A stepping stone? For once, Meghan didn't have a quick retort. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. She didn't beg him to believe in her love. She sat there, cool, collected, the actress within her calculating every expression. And then, in a voice so cold it froze Harry's blood, she admitted the truth, not with shame, but with sharpness. "Harry, you were never meant to find that diary. But yes, I needed you. I needed the title. I needed the platform. That's the world we live in. Without you, I was nothing. With you, I became unstoppable." There it was. The confession, not shouted in anger, not wept out in regret, but delivered like a businesswoman stating facts in a boardroom. It wasn't love, it was calculation. It wasn't romance, it was strategy. Meghan's words were knives, not apologies. Harry staggered back, the weight of her honesty crushing him. He had hoped, even after reading it, that maybe she would deny it. Maybe she would tell him it was all a misunderstanding. Maybe she would fight to convince him of her love. But instead, she confirmed his worst nightmare. And worse, she didn't even seem sorry. "Everything I gave up," Harry whispered, his voice breaking. "My family, my brother, my country. I walked away from all of it for you. And you're telling me it was all a lie?" Meghan didn't flinch. "It wasn't a lie, Harry. It was a deal. You gave me what I wanted, and in return, you got freedom. You got to walk away from the monarchy, from the press, from the life you always said you hated. Don't pretend you didn't want this too. That's when it hit him, the depth of the betrayal. She wasn't even pretending it was love anymore. She was reframing it as a transaction, a trade. He wasn't her husband in her eyes. He was her business partner. And the marriage wasn't a union of hearts. It was a contract of convenience. Imagine the fury boiling inside Harry in that moment. Imagine the grief crashing down on him like a wave. Every tender moment replaying in his mind, now tainted with doubt. Every laugh, every kiss, every whispered, "I love you," now sounding hollow, scripted, rehearsed. His whole life with Meghan redefined in an instant. And yet Meghan wasn't finished. She leaned forward, her voice sharp, her eyes unflinching. "You wouldn't even matter without me, Harry. The truth is, the world stopped caring about you the moment William had his family. You were the spare, always the spare. I gave you relevance. I gave you a stage. And now you want to throw that away because of a few words in a diary." That was the breaking point. Harry's grief turned to fury, and his fury turned to resolve. The man who once defended Meghan against the world finally saw her for who she was. And in that moment, something inside him snapped. He slammed his fist on the table, the sound echoing through the house. "Get out. Pack your things and leave. You are not the woman I thought I married. You are not the mother I want raising my children in lies. Get out." For the first time, Meghan's composure cracked. Not because of guilt, but because she realized Harry wasn't bluffing. This wasn't a sulk or a temporary argument. This was final. The man who once sacrificed everything for her was now sacrificing her. But Meghan wasn't going to go quietly. She narrowed her eyes, her voice low and threatening. "If I leave, I'm taking Archie and Lilibet with me. You can't just throw me out and expect me to leave them behind." Harry's answer was cold, determined, unshakable. "The children stay. They are not pawns in your game. You've used me for the last time, Meghan, but I won't let you use them." The tension in the room was electric, unbearable, a storm waiting to break. Meghan rose to her feet, her jaw set, her mind already racing with strategies, with counter-moves, with ways to twist this story to her advantage. But Harry stood firm, the diary in his hand like a shield, proof of everything she had admitted. This wasn't just a fight. This was the collapse of an empire they had built together. The Netflix deals, the book tours, the global brand. It all crumbled in that single moment of truth. Harry and Meghan were no longer a couple. They were enemies. And as Meghan stormed from the room, her mind burning with fury and calculation, Harry's eyes fell back on the diary. Those words, those confessions, would haunt him forever. But they also gave him the clarity he had been missing for years. Because now, there was no doubt. No excuses. No illusions left to cling to. Meghan had confessed it all. But the fight was far from over. Because what came next wasn't just heartbreak, it was war. And the battleground would be their home, their children, and the empire they had built on lies. What happens when a man who has been pushed, manipulated, and broken finally snaps? Rage. Pure, unfiltered rage. That's what filled the walls of the Montecito mansion the night Harry confronted Meghan with her diary and her cold confession. Rage that had been building for years. Rage at the press, at the palace, at his family for not understanding him, but now redirected fully at the woman he thought was his savior. The Montecito estate, usually a symbol of their supposed peace and freedom, turned into a battlefield. The night air was heavy, thick with tension, as Harry's fury erupted like a volcano that had been dormant for far too long. His voice, once tender and protective toward Meghan, became sharp, raw, unrecognizable. "Do you even hear yourself, Meghan?" he roared, pacing the room, hands clenched, his face red with anger. "You admitted it. You admitted you used me. You stood there and said it wasn't love, it was power. Was any of it real? Any of it? Was I just your ticket to Hollywood royalty?" Meghan stood calm at first, her eyes following him, her expression carefully controlled. She had faced the press, the palace, the world. Surely she could face Harry's rage. But this was different. Harry wasn't a journalist she could charm, or a critic she could dismiss. This was the man who had given her everything, and now he wanted to take it all back. Harry's words cut through the house, like thunder. The staff outside the room froze, listening, too afraid to intervene. The children upstairs, Archie awake, little Lilibet asleep, must have sensed the storm brewing below. Imagine their young ears catching fragments, shouting, doors slamming, voices sharp and broken. Harry slammed the diary down again, flipping it open, pointing at her words with a trembling hand. This is you, Meghan. This isn't the press twisting things. This isn't the palace making up stories. These are your words. I needed him for the crown. Not the man, just the title. Do you know what that does to me? Do you know what that does to our children? To think their mother never loved their father. For once, Meghan faltered. Her cool mask slipped, not into guilt or remorse, but into frustration. She snapped back, her voice rising, her American sharpness cutting through the night. And what about you, Harry? You think you're innocent? You think you're some victim? You hated that family long before me. You wanted out. You used me too, to escape. Don't pretend you were some helpless little prince. You wanted freedom, and I gave it to you. You'd still be in your gilded cage if it weren't for me. The words only fueled Harry's fury. He slammed his fist into the table, the wood groaning under the impact. Don't twist this, Meghan. Don't you dare twist this. I left everything, for you. I walked away from my brother, my father, my country. And for what? For lies? For manipulation? For a marriage that was nothing but a performance? His voice cracked with pain, his fury tangled with grief. He wasn't just angry, he was broken. Every ounce of trust, every belief in their love, every memory of their so-called fairy tale now poisoned. The fight escalated. Meghan's voice rose to match his, sharp, biting, refusing to back down. Do you think anyone in your family would have ever accepted me? Do you think they ever would have welcomed me in? No, they hated me from the start. I had to fight for every bit of respect, every bit of attention. And if I hadn't played the game, if I hadn't fought for my place, they would have destroyed me. So yes, I wrote those things. Because that's the truth of survival in your world. Harry's chest heaved. He ran his hands through his hair, pacing like a lion trapped in a cage. His voice dropped, low but trembling with power. Survival? Don't you dare call this survival. Survival isn't using the man who loves you. Survival isn't writing in your diary how you never cared, how it was all about status. That's not survival, Meghan. That's betrayal. Silence hung in the air for a moment, broken only by Harry's ragged breathing. And then came the words that changed everything. Get out, Harry said, his voice flat, final. Get out of this house. Tonight. Meghan's eyes widened, stunned, not because she didn't expect his rage, but because she didn't believe he would actually go through with it. Harry had always been the defender, the protector, the one who stood between her and the world. But now, he was standing against her. She tried to claw back control. If I go, I'm taking Archie and Lilibet. You can't keep them from me. You can't just throw me out and keep the children. Harry's fury sharpened into steel. They are not pawns. They stay here. They stay with me. You've used me for years, Meghan. I won't let you use them too. The room crackled with energy, the clash of two wills that had once been united but were now mortal enemies. Meghan, fiery, unyielding, already calculating her next move. Harry, shaking but resolute, finally drawing a line in the sand. Upstairs, the children's world hung in the balance. Downstairs, the illusion of a fairy tale marriage lay shattered on the floor beside the diary. That night, Montecito was no longer their sanctuary. It was the battlefield where love turned to war, where trust turned to ashes, and where Prince Harry finally declared that enough was enough. But Meghan was not going to leave quietly. She never had. And the storm that followed would not just rage in their mansion. It would spill into the world. Because what Meghan did next would shock even Harry. What happens when the fairy tale castle becomes a fortress under siege? That's exactly what Montecito turned into the night Harry finally told Meghan to leave. The walls that once shielded them from the world were now echoing with the sound of suitcases being dragged across marble floors, angry voices clashing, and the heavy silence of two people who knew their marriage was over. This wasn't just an argument, it was an eviction, and it was brutal. Harry stood firm. He had never looked more determined, more unshakable, even in the face of his wife's fury. His eyes burned with betrayal, his jaw locked, the diary still clenched in his hand like a weapon. Meghan, for the first time, wasn't entirely in control. She paced, her voice rising, her movements sharp and frantic. You can't do this, Harry. You don't get to throw me out of this house. You don't get to keep the children from me. Do you have any idea what this will look like? Do you have any idea what people will say? Harry's reply was ice cold. I don't care what people say anymore, Meghan. For years, I cared about the image, the narrative, the sympathy. That's over. You wrote it yourself. You never loved me. You used me. And I'll be damned if I let you do the same thing to Archie and Lilibet. The words hit like a whip. Meghan, usually unflappable, let out a sharp laugh. Not one of amusement, but of disbelief. Used you? Do you hear yourself? I built this life with you. I made us relevant. Without me, you're just the spare the monarchy discarded. You think the world cares about you without me by your side? You'll be nothing. Harry's chest rose and fell with the force of his breathing, his rage barely contained. I'd rather be nothing than live a lie another day. Pack your bags, Meghan. Tonight. And so it began. Meghan stormed through the house, grabbing clothes, jewelry, files, anything she could claim as hers. The sound of zippers tearing shut, drawers slamming, and hurried footsteps filled the mansion. The staff stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene or disappear. Some exchanged anxious looks, others whispered prayers. Because everyone knew this wasn't just another fight. This was the end. Archie appeared at the top of the staircase, wide-eyed, holding onto the railing with his small hands. Daddy? Mommy? What's happening? His little voice cut through the chaos like a knife. Both Harry and Meghan froze. For a moment, the rage faltered. For a moment, there was just a child watching his world collapse. Harry's voice softened as he turned to his son. It's okay, Archie. Daddy's here. Everything's going to be okay. Meghan, meanwhile, tried to step in, her face suddenly painted with maternal concern. Archie, come here, darling. Mommy's just going away for a little while. But Harry blocked her path. His voice hardened again. No, not tonight. Meghan's eyes blazed. The standoff wasn't just about a marriage anymore. It was about their children, about who got to shape their future, about who got to claim them. Meghan hissed through clenched teeth, her voice low and venomous. You think you can keep them from me? You'll regret this, Harry. You'll regret it for the rest of your life. I will not walk away without my children. Harry's answer came with terrifying calm. You already did, Meghan. The moment you wrote those words. The moment you admitted you never loved me. You forfeited this family the second you turned it into a performance. The kids stay. Meghan's fury flared, but her options were limited. She knew dragging Archie into the middle of the fight would scar him further. She knew Harry was dead serious. So she shifted gears, her mind racing with strategies. This wasn't over. If she couldn't win in the house, she would win outside it. She would win in the court of public opinion. With every suitcase packed, Meghan's determination grew. The doors slammed behind her, the night swallowing her figure as she disappeared into the darkness. Her phone already in hand. Calls would be made. Allies would be summoned. Lawyers, publicists, friends in Hollywood. She would build her counterattack brick by brick. If Harry thought he could end her reign in Montecito, he had no idea what storm was coming. But inside the mansion, Harry stood at the foot of the staircase, Archie clinging to his leg, Lilibet crying softly in her crib upstairs. The silence after Meghan's departure was deafening. Harry exhaled, heavy and broken, realizing the battle was only just beginning. He had won the night, but Meghan was not a woman who lost quietly. The eviction was complete. Meghan was gone from Montecito. But in leaving, she wasn't defeated, she was ignited. And Harry, still clutching the diary, knew he hadn't ended the war. He had only declared it. Because Meghan's counterattack would come swiftly. And when it did, it would shake not just their house, but the entire world. What happens when a woman who built her entire life on image and narrative suddenly finds herself cast out, her mask ripped away? She doesn't crumble, she retaliates. That's exactly what Meghan did the moment Harry told her to leave Montecito. To Harry, the eviction felt like an ending. To Meghan, it was just the beginning of her counterattack. She didn't leave quietly. She didn't sit in silence, licking her wounds. Meghan was already moving the pieces on the chessboard before her suitcases were even zipped. In the back of the black SUV that whisked her away from the estate, she had her phone out, scrolling through contacts, firing off messages, already plotting. Allies in Hollywood, executives at Netflix, producers who owed her favors, Oprah's team, PR strategists who knew how to spin even the ugliest story into a sympathetic headline. She would not be the villain in this saga. She would rewrite the script, again. Think about it. Meghan has always been a storyteller. That's how she survived in Hollywood, how she climbed from minor television roles to global headlines. She understood the power of perception, the importance of controlling a narrative. And now, with Harry in open revolt and the diary threatening to expose her private confessions, she was facing the biggest PR crisis of her life. But Meghan never played defense, she played offense. Her first move? Position Harry as unstable. A man broken by trauma, lashing out, making rash decisions. A man so fragile, he couldn't be trusted with his own judgment. That's the story she fed her allies. Late-night calls painted her as the victim of his volatility, the devoted wife cast aside by a husband unraveling under pressure. He's not well, she whispered to confidants. He's not thinking clearly. I've tried to help him, but he won't listen. Now he's punishing me, and it's the children who will suffer. Do you see the strategy? It wasn't just about defending herself. It was about planting seeds of doubt about Harry's stability. And given his public history, his admissions of panic attacks, his raw confessions about trauma, she knew the world would believe it. She didn't need to win the whole battle immediately. She just needed to muddy the waters, to make sure Harry's side of the story wouldn't go unchallenged. But Meghan wasn't stopping at whispers. She was already preparing the stage. Calls were made to sympathetic journalists. Stories drafted. Her team worked on framing her exit as an act of self-preservation, not rejection. Soon, headlines would read, Meghan forced out. Harry's explosive anger tears family apart. The diary? She would dismiss it as fantasy, an outlet for emotions, twisted and misused against her. Every woman keeps a journal, she would say. Every woman writes things in moments of pain she doesn't truly mean. Meanwhile, in California's elite circles, Meghan activated her Hollywood network. She floated the idea of a new tell-all, a book, a documentary, something to seize control of the narrative before Harry or the palace could weaponize the diary. Netflix, already invested in her brand, was eager. Controversy sells, and Meghan understood better than anyone that if she couldn't bury the scandal, she could monetize it. But here's where her strategy turned darker. Meghan began weaving a new story, not just about Harry's instability, but about his cruelty. She claimed he threatened to keep the children from her, that he shouted in rage, that she feared for their emotional safety. In private, she rehearsed her role, perfecting the face of the anguished mother fighting for her children. The irony? Those children had been the very pawns she wrote about in her diary, the symbols of her legacy. Now, she would use them again, but this time, as shields against Harry's accusations. Ask yourself, how many times have we seen this playbook before? The spin, the performance, the carefully staged interviews. Meghan wasn't improvising. She was executing a well-honed strategy. And Harry, still raw from betrayal, was unprepared for the speed and precision of her counterattack. Inside Montecito, Harry was broken. He had the diary. He had the truth. But Meghan had the spotlight. And in today's world, perception can be more powerful than fact. While Harry wrestled with grief, Meghan was on the phone with Oprah's team, discussing timing for a sit-down where she could cry on cue, deliver cutting one-liners, and paint herself as the misunderstood heroine once again. But there was one thing Meghan hadn't accounted for. Leaks. Because even as she crafted her counter-narrative, whispers of the diary's contents began to seep into the press. Quiet at first, then louder. Tabloids hinted at explosive private writings. Insiders spoke of cold admissions about status and power. And slowly, the words Meghan thought would stay hidden began creeping into the public eye. The world was stunned. Could it really be true? Could Meghan, the woman who preached love, compassion, authenticity, have written that she never loved Harry? That it was always about status? The public was divided. Some clung to Meghan's version, a misunderstood wife betrayed by an unstable husband. Others saw the diary as proof that the fairy tale had been a fraud from the start. Harry watched this unfold with mounting fury. It wasn't enough that she had betrayed him. Now she was trying to twist the world against him, to portray him as unstable, unfit, unworthy of trust. But the diary was his weapon, his proof, his one undeniable truth. And he knew that if the full contents went public, Meghan's mask would shatter forever. But here's the danger. Meghan was a master at flipping weakness into strength. Even exposed, she could spin her words as misunderstood, taken out of context, manipulated by enemies. She wasn't just fighting to protect her reputation. She was fighting for survival. And Harry knew she would burn the world down before admitting defeat. The counterattack had begun. Meghan had left Montecito, but she hadn't left quietly. She was rallying her army, preparing to launch her own version of events, weaponizing her image, her charm, her connections. Harry, meanwhile, held the diary close, his only shield in a war that was about to explode far beyond the walls of his California mansion. Because the next phase wouldn't be private. The next phase would be public. And when the diary leaks finally hit the headlines in full, the entire world would see Meghan's confession in black and white. What happens when whispers turn into headlines? When private words, never meant to be read, suddenly become public property. That's the nightmare Meghan faced, and the vindication Harry needed, when the contents of her secret diary began to leak. What started as quiet murmurs in the tabloids erupted into a global firestorm that no PR strategy could fully contain. The truth was out, and it was devastating. It began like all scandals do. Small, uncertain, cloaked in rumor. A British tabloid ran a story hinting that Meghan had kept a private diary during her years with Harry, filled with explosive revelations. At first, it sounded like the usual gossip, vague, unverified, easy to dismiss. Meghan's team quickly issued denials, calling it a sexist attempt to invade her privacy and typical tabloid nonsense. But then came the detail that couldn't be ignored, a direct quote. "I needed him to get the crown. Not the man, just the title." That line set the world on fire. It was too precise, too sharp, too damning to be invented. People gasped, argued, debated. Could Meghan really have written those words? Was it possible that the love story that enchanted millions was nothing more than a cold calculation? Within hours, social media exploded. Hashtags trended worldwide. Hashtag Meghan Diary. Hashtag Harry Betrayed. Hashtag Royal Lie. Memes flooded Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. Late-night comedians cracked jokes about Diarygate. And for the first time, Meghan's carefully curated image cracked. Not in whispers, but in front of the entire world. Harry watched it unfold with mixed emotions. On one hand, there was relief. At last, people could see what he had seen, what had broken him inside Montecito. On the other hand, there was grief. The whole world was now privy to the betrayal that had already shredded his heart. What had once been a private wound was now a global spectacle. And though it vindicated him, it also left him exposed. The leaks didn't stop with that one line. More entries trickled out. Notes where Meghan described Harry as useful. Passages where she strategized about leveraging the royal brand for media deals. Words where she admitted that love was never her motivation, status was. The more the leaks spread, the more her reputation collapsed. Think about it. Meghan had built her brand on authenticity, compassion, victimhood, and modern fairy tale romance. The diary revealed the opposite: calculation, manipulation, ambition. The contradiction was brutal, and people noticed. Headlines screamed betrayal. Was it ever real? Meghan's chilling confessions. Harry, pawn in a love game. Meghan scrambled. Her PR team issued statements claiming the diary had been taken out of context, that words had been selectively leaked, that it was all part of a smear campaign. She did interviews where she appeared teary-eyed, claiming she had written in moments of pain and loneliness, that the diary didn't reflect her true feelings. But the damage was done, because no matter how she spun it, those words were hers, and they rang louder than any carefully rehearsed defense. And the reactions weren't just from the public. Buckingham Palace couldn't stay silent. Courtiers leaked their own quiet satisfaction, telling reporters that the truth always comes out. Royal commentators shook their heads, claiming they had warned Harry for years. Even William, always cautious, was reportedly furious. Not because he enjoyed his brother's suffering, but because Meghan's words confirmed everything he had feared. Catherine, sympathetic but firm, was said to have told friends, "Now Harry knows what we all knew." But here's the twist: Meghan wasn't finished fighting. Even as the leaks spread, she doubled down on her narrative. She claimed Harry was complicit, that he was the one leaking the diary to destroy her. She painted herself as the victim of his rage, a mother torn from her children by a vindictive husband. And once again, the world split. Some saw her as a manipulator finally exposed. Others clung to her as a woman unfairly hunted by the press. Harry, meanwhile, faced his own dilemma. He could release the entire diary, proving once and for all that the quotes were real, that Meghan's betrayal was undeniable. Or he could stay silent, letting the leaks speak for themselves. But silence came with a cost. It allowed Meghan to spin her counter-narrative. And Harry knew she was already planning her next big move. Another interview, another carefully crafted performance, another chance to turn public sympathy back in her favor. And what about Archie and Lilibet? The children became unwilling symbols in the storm. The press speculated endlessly. Who would they live with? What would they think when they grew up and read their mother's words? Meghan insisted she should have custody, framing herself as the nurturing mother. Harry insisted they needed protection from the woman who had written that devastating confession. The battle lines were drawn, not just in the media, but in the courts. The diary leaks had done more than damage Meghan's reputation. They had escalated the war. This was no longer a private marriage dispute. This was a global scandal, dragging in the monarchy, the press, Hollywood, and millions of onlookers around the world. And in the middle of it all was Harry, angry, humiliated, betrayed, but finally vindicated. But here's the cruel irony. Vindication doesn't heal a broken heart. Proof doesn't erase pain. And as the world laughed, debated, and dissected Meghan's words, Harry was left staring at the ruins of his marriage, his family, and his trust. The world knew the truth now, but at what cost? And as Meghan prepared her next move, one question haunted everyone watching. If she could survive this, what else was she capable of? Because the diary had destroyed the illusion. But Meghan wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. What happens when the walls of Buckingham Palace tremble with whispers that turn into shouts? When the House of Windsor, so accustomed to secrecy, composure, and stiff upper lips, is forced to react to one of the most humiliating betrayals ever attached to the royal name. That's exactly what unfolded when Meghan's diary leaks went public. The royal family, already battered by years of scandal, drama, and Harry's very public departures, now had to deal with an entirely new crisis, one they hadn't orchestrated, one they hadn't anticipated, and one that left them with a strange mixture of vindication and grief. Inside the palace, there was no celebration. There was no smug satisfaction that Meghan had been exposed. Instead, there was a heavy silence. Because for all the anger directed at Meghan, there was also heartbreak for Harry. This wasn't just about a woman deceiving a prince. This was about a son, a brother, a grandson, who had sacrificed everything for someone who admitted, in her own hand, that she never truly loved him. And the royals, perhaps more than anyone else, understood what that devastation meant. King Charles was the first to respond privately. Sources close to him said he was deeply shaken. For years, he had struggled to balance his role as monarch with his role as father. He had endured Harry's public attacks, his Netflix deals, his memoir filled with painful accusations. But now, as he read the diary excerpts for himself, Charles reportedly murmured, "He was used. My boy was used." Imagine the weight of that statement. A father recognizing too late the trap his son had walked into, a trap that perhaps could have been avoided if the family bonds hadn't fractured so violently. And then there was William. For him, the revelations cut deep, not because they surprised him, but because they confirmed everything he had feared. He had warned Harry years earlier to slow down, to be cautious, to see Meghan for who she truly was. Harry had lashed out, accusing William of snobbery, cruelty, even betrayal. Their bond, once unbreakable, had been torn apart. And now, the diary proved William right. Friends close to William said he felt sick to his stomach, not out of triumph, but out of sorrow. To know you were right is one thing. To know your brother's life was destroyed because he refused to listen, that's a pain few could bear. Catherine, ever the steady hand, was said to have shown quiet compassion. She told her circle, Harry must feel utterly lost. There was no gloating, no celebration, just quiet recognition that the family's worst fears had come true. Catherine, who had endured Meghan's barbed accusations of cruelty and coldness, could now breathe a little easier knowing the truth had surfaced. But she also knew the road ahead for Harry would not be easy. Betrayal may vindicate your enemies, but it doesn't heal the victim. And then there was the late Queen's shadow. Those who had served her recalled her early skepticism about Meghan's intentions. She had welcomed her in, yes, but always with caution. She had lived through abdications, divorces, scandals. She knew ambition when she saw it. Those in her circle whispered that the Queen would not have been surprised by the diary, though she would have been deeply saddened for Harry. And now, with her gone, the family was left to navigate the fallout without her steady guidance. But let's not forget, the royals are not just a family. They are an institution. And the institution had to respond strategically. Publicly, they remained silent, following their age-old mantra. Never complain, never explain. But behind closed doors, advisors debated fiercely. Should they issue a statement condemning Meghan's betrayal? Or would silence allow the scandal to burn itself out, leaving Meghan to crumble under the weight of her own words? In the end, they chose silence. Because silence, in this case, spoke louder than any condemnation. Silence allowed the world to draw its own conclusions, and the world's conclusions were damning. And yet, there was an undercurrent of opportunity. Some courtiers began whispering that the diary scandal could be the path to Harry's redemption. For years, he had been painted as the traitor prince, the disloyal son, the wayward brother who chose Hollywood over heritage. But now, with Meghan exposed as the manipulator, Harry could be seen as the victim. A man deceived, betrayed, led astray. A man who, perhaps, could return to the fold. But here's the question. Would Harry want to return? Could he ever truly go back to the palace he had once rejected so publicly? Could he reconcile with the brother he had branded his rival, the father he had criticized, the institution he had damned? And even if he wanted to, would the British people accept him again? These were the questions echoing through every gilded corridor of the monarchy. And then came the global reaction. Presidents, celebrities, commentators, all weighed in. Some expressed sympathy for Harry, praising his courage to face the truth. Others mocked Meghan mercilessly, dubbing her the diary duchess, the status seeker, the actress who fooled a prince. Royal biographers declared it the final nail in the coffin of Meghan's credibility. For once, the royal family wasn't the one under fire. Meghan was. And in that rare moment, the Windsors felt the public tide shift back in their favor. But the relief was tempered by one looming truth. Meghan wasn't finished. She never had been. For every headline against her, she had a counter-narrative brewing. For every diary leak, she had a media ally ready to spin. And as the palace debated how to handle the scandal, Harry himself was faced with the most difficult decision of his life. Would he continue to stand alone, raising Archie and Lilibet in Montecito, scarred but free? Or would he turn back toward the family he had abandoned, seeking their protection, their guidance, and perhaps their forgiveness? The royal family's reaction was clear. They were waiting. Waiting for Harry to make his move. Waiting to see if the prodigal son would return. Waiting to see if Meghan's counterattack would succeed. Because the scandal may have given them vindication, but the war was far from over.